Do not give up. Let me repeat. If you are an early stage founder or you are a new founder and you are trying to raise early stage funding and build your startup, do not give up. And this is going to be a bit of a ranting video. So if you're expecting something that's all put together, you might as well skip this video right now because I need to get something off my chest. This all started when I got a disheartening email from a founder saying that they are giving up on their fundraising. And I completely understand and I empathize. But some of the content of this email has been repeated from various sources, and I've heard this over and over again from places such as Reddit. I actually posted my thoughts on this in Reddit, and I got totally flamed by the comment section. And I understand. I know where founders are coming from. I have complete empathy. But let me break this down for you, because there are some founders out there that think that raising capital is all about privilege. That if somehow you've gone to an Ivy League school or you're part of a wealthy family, that capital is just going to be given to you. It's going to be handed to you on a silver platter by venture capitalists. And let me just acknowledge, yes, there are VCs or there are angel investors even that want to do business who they want to do business with. And yes, there are individuals who have an easier time networking with investors because they've gone to an Ivy League school or they've come from a place where there is considered privilege for being part of that club or being part of that family or even living in that part of the country. I got some interesting comments saying that it's different in other parts of the world, such as Europe, because North America, or the United States in particular, has an interesting phenomenon when it comes to those Ivy League schools, when it comes to Silicon Valley. But I want to say, as a 7-time funded founder and working with other founders who have raised hundreds of millions of dollars, that is not solely based on your pedigree, not based on your family or where you went to school. In fact, I know founders, I work with them on a weekly basis that have gone to Stanford, that have gone to Harvard, these Ivy League schools, and have just as equal hard time of raising capital. Think about this from the perspective of the VC. A VC has a general partner and they typically have LPs, limited partners. And if I was a general partner and I went to my LPs and I said, hey, I invested in this founder only because I knew them from Harvard, well, guess what? Lawsuits would fly because I am not fulfilling my fiduciary responsibilities of managing and allocating their capital. And in fact, if I had gone to Harvard or I went to Stanford, that deserves merit. That's not privilege. Privilege is defined by you doing absolutely nothing and suddenly everything being handed to you. That's what I consider privilege. And I fully acknowledge that there are founders that are underprivileged in terms of they don't have access to the same opportunity. They are from other countries and maybe they've got other things working against them. But I also have data that most of the unicorns that have generated a lot of the money come from immigrants and who've gotten really scrappy when it comes to having that chip on their shoulder because they've had to adopt a growth mindset. And as I was saying, if I went to Harvard, I went to Stanford, the fact that you out there, if you're a founder right now and you went to Harvard and Stanford or an Ivy League school, you worked to get there. I'm pretty sure you had to apply, you had to graduate. I'm pretty sure that maybe a small, tiny fraction of people maybe bought their degrees. I'm not even sure if that's even possible. And yes, there can be families with influence and wealth, but are you going to let that stop you from achieving your dream of building your startup? I am proof that you do not need a degree to raise capital or build a successful startup. And I know other founders that are totally proof of the same thing as well. They prove that it is a meritocracy, that yes, you can raise money based on merit. And yes, does a background or a certain pedigree help you with certain steps? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, you still have to build a fundable startup. If there is anything in terms of pedigree, that would be a founder that raised a large amount of VC money or exited and made a VC a bunch of money. That's pedigree, that's background. Think about Adam Neumann for a second. He raised $1 billion for WeWork, flamed out, and then he went and raised another $1 billion for another startup. Why does that happen? Because that is so rare. Because as much as you want to say, oh, you know what, that was just given to him, he has pedigree, he worked for that pedigree. Doesn't matter what you think about WeWork, doesn't matter what you think about Adam Neumann. I have opinions about Adam Neumann. The fact is that he earned the right. He earned the merit to go out and talk to VCs, and now raising funds is easier for him. Not everybody is in that situation. I completely get it. But if you're going to give up because you think the world is stacked against you, that's all just about privilege out there, you're falling into something called the external locus of control. Think about it like a student. A student with an internal locus of control, they believe that they can do what it takes to learn and to grow. They say if they get a bad grade, they go, I need to study more. I need to work harder. But if you have an external locus of control, that student will say, oh, the teacher didn't prepare me enough, or this school is stacked against me, or there's racism, there's systemic things against me. And I fully acknowledge, people will throw it in my face all the time. Racism does exist. I experience racism. I experience all the different things in terms of the bias that hold certain people down. And yes, I believe those things filter in the system because there are people who are making the decision, who have the authority based on their bias. And yes, I've seen sexism. I have seen venture capitalists. I've seen investors treat women founders absolutely horribly. And I get it. But my question is, are you going to let that affect you, or can you rise above it? Because you don't want to give up based on these factors. Yes, you are allowed to be discouraged and disheartened. You're allowed to get angry and upset, but you're not allowed to give up because of those factors external to you. You don't want to give up based on those reasons alone. Yes, you have to understand it is very hard to raise capital. It's very hard to build a startup. 90% of startups are not going to be successful. That's the reason venture capitalists look for all these different signals to try and de-risk the investment. But you are going to regret giving up because you have an external locus of control. You're going to play victim, you're going to blame everybody else, and you are not going to grow as a founder. You are allowed to experience hard times. The struggle that you out there are feeling right now, raising capital, building a startup, that is real, that is legitimate, and that is all part of the process. That is what's going to help you gain that resilience and help you grow to that success. And it may not be in that particular startup, but you are going to be successful eventually if you take that internal locus of control. You have that growth mindset and say, I can learn, I can change. Maybe you just have to get realistic about your traction. Maybe you have to get realistic about a plan B, or make funding plan B and make traction plan A. Go out and make sales. I know founders out there that wouldn't get funded by a VC, that investors turned them away. And you know what they did? They bootstrapped a company to tens and twenties of millions of dollars, and now they don't need VCs. And guess what? Those investors are calling them saying, do you need money? Do you need money? And they say, no. Where were you back then? I don't need money right now. And they're actually grateful that there was resistance that forced them to get resourceful, get creative, and work themselves out of that situation. Think about Twitch. Twitch came from YC. That's all the privilege that you need. You say, I'm from YC. They were doing extremely well, but then they ran out of money and they went to investors, and investors would not invest. And what did they do? They locked themselves in a room and said, we're not leaving here until we figure out some revenue streams, because investors are like, the numbers just don't add up. And guess what? They walked out of there and they started advertising on their live streams, and the rest is history. They sold for $1 billion. I'm telling you right now, as crappy as it is to feel that rejection, as crappy as it is to look out at venture capital and look at other founders that are raising, they get all the press, it feels even crappier to have regret. And I think about some advice that I hear from Alex Hormozy. He said, I would rather be afraid and fail than be a coward. I'm kind of paraphrasing what he said, but you don't want your attitude in your head to cause the most painful emotion of all later on, and that's regret. You'd rather try and learn, because that's going to build, that's going to stack up future success, than say, you know what, it's everybody else's fault. Everybody else has control over this. I'm not going to get anywhere, and you're going to give up. The worst part of it is you won't even realize that you've done it to yourself, because you're probably going to be bitter and resentful, because all you're going to be thinking about is that external control, those external factors that you think are pressing you down. And like I said, they may be pressing you down, but that doesn't mean you can't change your reaction to it. And I would rather have you fail at raising funding for your startup and fail your startup, but become a better person, and to say, Ed, I watched your videos. Ed, I heard your encouragement, and now I'm successful in my own way. I've learned so much. I've matured. I've grown up. I've taken responsibility. I'm accountable for my own thoughts and my own actions, and I am a better person, a better founder, entrepreneur. It doesn't matter. School teacher, cab driver, I do not care. Because your startup success does not determine your value. And what a VC does, whether you get funded or not, and those zeros on those checks that you get as far as funding, that does not determine your identity and your self-worth. If you let that determine your self-worth, that is an extrinsic motivation, that is an external factor, and you are never going to win. You're going to be miserable for the rest of your life, in the sense that you're always going to be wondering, something's missing. You're always going to feel bad, and you're going to struggle with that identity. And we have this expression, I fought the good fight. I ran the race. Doesn't matter what the outcome is. And that's how I feel about all my failed startups. I tell people all the time, I'm a 7-time funded founder with 2 exits. That's just a fancy way of saying I failed a bunch of times. And I embrace that. They're part of my identity, not the failure, but what I've learned from it, how much stronger I've become. And as cliche as it sounds, that which does not kill you makes you stronger. It's the same with startups. And this has allowed me to advise other founders who are discouraged. Look them in the eye and say, hey, do not give up. Let's do this together. Let's stay positive, because it's going to help you so much more down the road in the future. And we're all playing the long game together. That's my rant about this. I'm going to leave you with that. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'm sure I'm going to get flamed in the comments. There's always going to be trolls and haters in the comments that tell me, Ed, you don't understand. It is totally about privilege, etc. The system is completely rigged. I get it. I'm used to it by now. You should see what happened to me on Reddit. You might want to look that up. But let's stick together, and I appreciate you spending the time to listen to this video. If you've gotten this far, I'll see you in the next video.